thank you very much, everyone, for coming to our panel conversation. And it is going to be a conversation today. I'm really pleased. Firstly, this is a fantastic panel. And in a moment, I'm going to get Joe and Mickey to introduce themselves. But this isn't just a dull conversation between us on the stage.
Which it would be.
Yeah. But what I'm really hoping is it's a conversation that includes everyone in this room. Joe, Mickey, I'd love to do just a tiny bit of an introduction here. I'm Simon, by the way, but you're not here to listen to me. You're here to find out a bit more about Mickey and Joe. And I was hoping you could do a bit of an introduction. And as international visitors, I was hoping you could also tell us one interesting discovery or observation that you've encountered since you've been in Australia. Mickey, do you want to do a bit of an introduction, but also one observation about Australia?
Yeah, totally. So my name's Mickey. I'm head of MLOps for a company called FeatureForm, which is an open source virtual feature store in the US. I'm also famous on LinkedIn for having a big mouth that just happens to occasionally land on MLOps and ML, and for being just a serial job hopper. But I call it, gaining skills in industries. The fun fact is that you guys have one really midget kangaroos called patty melons. And they are so cute and they are of least concern. But your your koalas are like 80% decimated in the last 5 to 10 years. And they're cute. I can also kind of see why. They don't really move very fast. It seems like they spend most of their time sleeping. I didn't realize that they were actually it's very concerning how few of them there are. So that was interesting. It was the really cute thing was not extinct, but the bigger thing kind of is going extinct.
Yes, that is both true and sobering. Joe.
Fun fact, huh? Fact, not fun. Take care of your koalas. They're cute. I'm Joe. I think as earlier mentioned, I'm a recovering data scientist. So I've been working in the machine learning space, Jesus Christ, for a long, long time. I guess back then we didn't even use the term AI because it wasn't cool to use that. So this is before deep learning anyway. So I've been in the ML space for a long time, gravitated towards data engineering. So I can't say I'm full-time in ML, but it still has a special place in my heart. So good. Glad to be on a panel here. Hope to kind of bridge the gap between data and ML engineering and things I learned about Australia. Well, the last time I was here in Melbourne, which was last year for DataEngBytes, everyone kept asking, so you guys don't even bother introducing yourselves or whatever? It's the first question is, have you tried the coffee in Melbourne? It's the only, it's just a way of saying hello. The coffee here is really, really good. And so I was really glad to get back here and try some of your awesome coffee. I don't think this it's hotel conference coffee, but it's coffee nonetheless in Melbourne. And it is okay. So, but you'd have good coffee here.
Yes, in a peeking behind the curtain moment this morning, as we were trying to set up for this morning, I was given the important task of popping out and getting coffee. And because I'm not actually familiar with this area, I foolishly asked someone to point me to the closest and best coffee, and it was a very long conversation. But we eventually found the coffee in the end.
It was good. It was good. I was panicking because it was right before my talk, so I was I wonder where Simon is. But thank you.
Anyway. We would like to move the conversation beyond coffee. And I think on this stage, we have basically data engineering, recovering data scientist, ML-Ops and ML-Ops engineering. So we've got someone who can ask silly questions and some incredible talented folk who can answer. But I was wondering if there's questions that we could get from the audience. What's on your mind when you're thinking about ML-Ops and ML-Ops engineering? What's something you've been pondering about, something you've been thinking about? I'm going to go first, but I really hope that folks in this room can also supplement this with a number of sort of questions that are on your mind. Something that's on my mind, and I was thinking about this from the session just after lunch. Within this room, we've got folks who identify themselves as data engineers, data scientists, analytic engineers. So we've essentially got different bits of the data profession represented in this audience. And I guess I'm wondering, what's kind of like your overall advice or consideration or sort of binding factor that is important for everyone in this room? Across disciplines, what do you think is important to consider when we're talking about MLOps, MLOps engineering, and some cross-cutting advice that's going to work across professions?
I'll go first. I mean, because life cycle has been top of mind for me. Actually, I heard a saying the other day. Juniors think in terms of tools, seniors think in terms of life cycles. Right. So, I think when you're starting out, like you got to get your foot in the door, no matter what. Right. And it's like kick and scratch, learn the tools to get the job. Right. So there's a list you can get of the top tools to learn and all this fun stuff. But I think at some point, you definitely move past that, right? Because tools are tools; they come and go, right? But really, it's about learning the fundamentals of your craft. Learning. I think the data lifecycle is something that I've been acutely aware of, and I think that's going to become more and more important. Especially as the divide between. I think there's really a false dichotomy right now with like quote data and machine learning and like software. I think ultimately in the next 10 years, these are all going to converge to basically being the same thing. You're going to be serving data-powered applications that happen to have, machine learning and everything else under the sun in it, because that's just how it's going to be, right? I think the distinctions between all these divides are, I think they're a bit artificial. And so I would say, study other disciplines. I always say if you want to know where the field's going, just study where software engineering has been for the past 10 or 20 years, right? All the practices are adopting ML-Ops, right? That's from DevOps. DataOps. Well, that's also from DevOps. DevOps. If you really want to get hardcore, you should go study Lean. You know what Lean is? In manufacturing. Anyway, just Google it. It's basically the practice of removing waste from your processes, right? But that's where DevOps came from. So know your history. Go backwards. But I think by understanding the context in which we do everything, that I think that gives you the foundation to really cross disciplines quite seamlessly. So what do you think, Mickey?
I mean, so that was interesting. So I was talking with folks earlier about this, and I think that was the talk I was trying to do in Brisbane. I don't think I was actually really successful with it. But so the recovering data scientist, the MLOps engineer that tried to be a data scientist and then was like shit at deploying stuff. That's like my origin story, right? And I think we've talked about this like a ton of different times. So I think the fun story I like to tell everyone is like before you and Matt published your data engineering book, right? And we had the GCP data engineering study group going on. Yeah, we did do that before it. So
I known Mickey for a while. We're old friends.
Yes. And we had met through another friend, Harpreet Soda. He used to have these Artists of Data Science happy hours on Fridays during the pandemic. It was wonderful. A lot of people met each other through that group. But at some point, this might have been before I moved to MailChimp or whatever, right? It might have been during, but actually it might have been when I was trying to build a real estate startup. And I was talking to you and I was asking in many ways very junior questions. I'm like, I don't know what tools to, build. I don't know how I should evaluate things. I had a lot more expertise with the ML side, with the product side, but I was really struggling with the data infrastructure side. And you were like, well, all our employees in the consulting firm, right, that you and Matt ran, we have to do the GCP data engineering certification. So you're like, come join our sessions, right? Because those kind of fundamentals is actually something that a lot of even data engineers don't know, never mind data scientists or MLEs. So that was that was a fun experience. And then you guys published the book and that was really cool, But I think a lot of what we had all talked about was that sometimes people get a little bit hung up on the titles and it kind of prevents them from seeing beyond their immediate work. So for example, it's very easy as a data scientist to say, oh, all I do is models. I will never ever do data. And in deploying, that's that engineering team's job to worry about. You just toss the model over the wall. But a lot of the early data scientists like yourself we're not like that. You're kind of the full stack data scientist. It's only been maybe, 8 years ago that the data scientists became, maybe 8 to 10, right?
I had to carry the numbers real
Yeah.
quick. I'm like, wait, how long ago was that?
Yeah. But it was maybe only in the last 8 to 10 years ago that the data scientist, to be very blunt, was neutered down to the person who just builds models, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, data science. Who feels they understand what data science is? Exactly. Me neither.
This might be a great time to pass to the audience to see if they've got any questions. And spicy questions are also appreciated.
Hi, thank you. My name is Karan. Thanks for the panel discussion. All of a sudden, we all have started using ChatGPT, and AI is such a big hype. And I'm sure it must be on everyone's mind, especially in the data and technology space, that how are we going to align with this pace of implementing this new technology. And it's not just about implementing, but as developer, what would you advise to be able to how do we keep up with the pace from learning and development perspective? And do you see the roles getting blend in near future? Like, for example, do you see data engineers and data scientists mixing up as a common role, like we have analytics engineer? Do you see such blend of roles in near future? Thank you.
That one real quick. Yeah, so honestly, and this kind of ties into what would be the advice for data practitioners and all that, especially when you have new shit constantly coming your way. By the way, I also cuss. It's a thing, so sorry. But so a lot of the discussions around LLM ops and all that, you do hear particular patterns constantly being pushed, and I think there's a couple things to think about. One is that a lot of times those patterns are pushed with this intent to support certain vendors and vendor implementations. So I would say take a grain of salt when you look at a lot of the stuff that's coming out about generative AI and LLM implementations. But also going back to that, sometimes patterns are cyclical. A lot of the concerns around LLMs is the same concerns people had around MLOps, is the same concern people have around data ops tooling, and how to do it reliably and in a way that's safe and you get the most bang out buck. And you could even draw a lot of those parallels. So even if people are sort of pushing the argument that LMs deserve their own stack or whatever, right? I mean, yeah, there are some things that are unique to LMs, but there are some things about deploying LM applications that are very similar to developing vanilla ML applications, like data ML, data applications, you name it.
I also suggest, I think that's great, focus on use cases and outcomes. That's what you get paid to do is, facilitate outcomes, not put a large language model in production or use LLMs. Nothing is ever done for its own sake, right? That's not what you get paid to do. So, and the question you should always ask you have a job, right? Yeah, okay, some people don't, they're students, but if you're a student or if you have a job, the best piece of advice I could give is understand how your company makes money and work backwards from there. Right? Especially in this day of, uncertainty and redundancies, that's good. So if large language models have a place, then that's terrific. If they don't, I don't feel like you're missing out on stuff. There's always new trends. This is the latest one of this year. I kind of think it's also like Web3, right? There's some utility to large language models in generative AI. I personally think it's horribly overhyped. But there's obvious utility. But with every tech cycle, though, there's obvious utility, and there's overinflated expectations. So you'll find out where that is probably once a bubble bursts and people are still chugging along, right? But that's how I'd look at it. But I wouldn't look at it like a FOMO, oh my gosh, everyone's doing generative AI and I really feel like I'm missing out. If you feel like you're missing out, then go do it, by all means. But don't feel also compelled. If you're not doing that, you're a useless person. Right? So don't attach yourself to technologies, I guess is what I'm saying. I've seen this happen before, actually, right? So I was actually having lunch with one of my friends a bit ago, and we're talking about the old Hadoop days. And back then, who remembers when Hadoop was first introduced? Like that many people good at counting. There were, back in the day, right? MapReduce. Nobody's going to be writing SQL. That's what it was. That was the old trope. Data warehousing is dead, right? And then machine learning, the first generation, before deep learning came along, right? Everyone's like, machine learning is going to take away business analytics. Like, there's no need to do BI anymore. That was back like 2010 or something, right? So we've been prognosticating the end of everything for a long time, and it never happens. So I wouldn't worry about it.
I think
you should hop into the next hype cycle. Really, is what you really should do. I don't know what that is yet, but like, find out what's after like Gen AI, because that's like November 2022, and like we're already like almost there. So you got to be like, it's like fashion, right? You got to look at next season. I'm joking, but not really actually. Although, it depends on your goals. If you want to make a quick buck at stuff, right? If you want to be like some carnival barking guy who like makes a lot of money just hugging products, like jump trends, right? There are people that do this. The Web3 influencers are now all AI experts all of a sudden, right? They're the 4-week camp you can sign up for. You can become a prompt engineer. So.
Although to take that analogy of the fashion thing, because I have absolutely no invested interest in it whatsoever. I mean, to that point, right? There's a difference between like a fashion trend versus having personal style, right? Personal style is going to be unique to you. It's going to be something that carries you through all the trends. But guess what? A trend is it pops up on social media, and then guess what? It gets trashed like 2 weeks later. And many people would argue to everyone else's detriment. The environment, the workers, everyone involved in that hype train gets absolutely damaged. But you developing a certain point of view that is kind of well grounded in an understanding of the foundations, that will carry you through any of these cycles.
Well, let me tell you this too. You want to know everything crashed and burned in all these cycles I just mentioned? At the end of the day, it was the data, right? Every time I've seen ML hype cycles come and go, it's because, especially when we're talking about tabular data, images and all this and unstructured data is actually relatively simple to work with. That's easy. When you get to corporate data sets, it's gnarly, right? Who feels here? I asked this to the audience here. I'll ask it again. Who feels like their corporate data sets are just awesome to use and they're perfect and like you can just hug them and love them? Yeah.
I used to work at a bank, so anything after that, I'm like, this is the best data I've ever seen in my life.
Right, exactly. So,
but I have pretty low standards.
Wow. This is the reality of it, right? So I mean, I've worked in auto ML startups before where like, say, give us a data set, we'll give you predictions. I worked at probably the first one on the planet back in the day, and I can assure you this problem is not solved, right? So for companies to say, oh, we're going to unlock all the potential of our data with large language models, I'm like, have fun. Go for it. If you can do it, hell yeah. I'm more power to you. But I know how hard it is. So
my question to you, Joe, is like the sense I get. Sorry, Simon.
I'm out of a job. But we're all about lifting the boats here and making sure that we're focusing on the right problems. So I'm happy to sit back and just get you to do
what do you think, Simon?
Well, I was going to ask, like, do you feel like people actually give a damn about cost cutting? Like in the sense of like when it, so yeah, I know I was gonna, flesh out that question a bit more. So, for example, all this excitement over LMs, a lot of companies now are like starting to say like, hey, maybe we actually like, they want to go do LMs. They're realizing that their infrastructure is shit, their data is shit. It's kind of pulling them through those stages that they really should have been going through anyway. Is that like when I think about a lot of these like data quality and ML infrastructure quality measures, like people ask me all the time, they're like, we can't get buy-in on XYZ. And I feel like a lot of companies, especially bigger companies, they're not really motivated by cost cutting. They're motivated by revenue generating. And I'm wondering if for a lot of folks, maybe that's the problem with the conversations they're having.
I mean, I can't speak for every company, right? But I do see that everyone wants a magic bullet, right? So a silver bullet, I guess, whatever it is. Cost cutting is an interesting one, but so when you sell to the business, right? Do you want to talk in terms of cutting costs? You want to talk in terms of raising or making more money, right? People have loss aversion. That's why I always want to talk about how you can make more money. If you try and sell cost cutting, for example, it's like that scares people. It's like, oh, I don't want to lose that, right? So this is advice for you when you talk to the biz. It's always about how much more can I make with this, right? Nobody wants to play defense. That's stupid. Like, why do that? Even that kind of makes a lot of sense, but that's not human nature. So, in machine learning, I've been in the game for a while, but I noticed there's two levers you can pull. There's a revenue side, right, and raising the bottom and top line, which is also cost cutting, by the way. There's also share price. So your company might embark on an AI initiative because your CEO thinks it's a good idea to tell the shareholders and the street, Wall Street, that they're doing AI, right? So your toaster company might become an AI company tomorrow because that's how it is, and then your share price goes to the roof, right? That's good for the shareholders. So I've seen this happen a lot. If you're a private company, say you're a startup, you bring dorks like me in back in the day, and I would raise your valuation. You get a couple of extra points, and you're on that X right there, of your multiplier. Why? Because now you're doing machine learning or AI, right? All you need to do is put it in your pitch deck. It's like, oh, we got AI on our roadmap. We have a data scientist there, so obviously.
To piggyback off of that, like I think it's fair to say, right? And I've seen this too. Like,
we're so far off his question, by the way.
I know we are so far off, but you know what? This reminds me of our pandemic Fridays. So I'm digging this. Not being in the pandemic and lockdown again, but the memories and joys and the mutual therapy session that we all engaged in. But I think like that's the challenging bit because, so for example, before this, I was showing Joe a thread on the data engineering subreddit, which was basically like, which are the worst influencers to avoid? Joe, by the way, Joe and Matt were not on that list. People were like, the Monday data show is amazing. So, and I think there is a reason for that. And I think part of the reason is that when we look at how much content and the discussion dialogues that's going out there, a lot of it is hype driven. A lot of it is not rooted or grounded in like, one, what's the real problems being faced by like practitioners? What are the real challenges to like implementing like a strategy or roadmap? Because a lot of that's getting mixed in with, how to put it, the personalities of CEOs and tech leaders out there. And I think to that point, right, it does feel like sometimes the data and ML divide was sort of fueled by this desire for like TAM, as opposed to we're kind of solving the underlying problems that need to be solved.
So I think you can sense here that we have an opinion on just about anything. If you've got a question, we can probably take this from ideas about your career all the way through to the LLM of kitchen appliances.
So neutral and unbiased we
so
are.
So I did actually want to make sure that we had the opportunity.
About kitchen appliances, actually. We can just talk about that the rest of the time.
Okay. I'm going to have to register a domain in a moment. Now, I would like to make sure that we've still got an opportunity to hear from the audience. So please, we've got a question over here.
Yeah. Right behind you, then it'll do the triangle of Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe and Mackie. So both of you, great presentations. I'm Daniel. I'm a machine learning engineer in the retail world. So now I'm working on a project. We are productionizing the model from data scientists. And then now my question would be, how do we balance the delivery time and the quality of what we are delivering?
How do you balance the what?
How do you balance the time?
Delivery time versus the quality. Like, do we do good logging, monitoring, alerting, testing, whatsoever?
So, and just to get further clarity, so it seems like you have a process, or do you have a process for productionizing models, or is this your first time?
We do have a process, which is not mature enough. We're always evolving and updating our process.
And then the question is about, like, in terms of the process of delivering more models in the future, how do you balance the quality and the time?
Yeah. Currently, we are focusing on one use case, and we are constantly get message from the business stakeholders, like, can we go faster? Can we go even more faster? Something like that.
But why do they want to go faster?
Because the faster they go, maybe the faster they will realize the business benefits in terms of money, the profit.
So what metric are you being held to?
For the entire project, so the OKR is always, the business benefits. So that's for the entire project. So, and then maybe the faster that we can deliver our project, then the earlier they can generate money, profit out of that. But then it takes time to setting up, guardrails and everything.
Do you feel really stressed out right now?
Little bit, because
yes.
I'm kind of pushing something back. But again, but then I understand those questions are valid questions. So how do we kind of do the trade-off, do the balance, even do the compromisation, whatever? So that's questions in my head, but I don't have a good answer.
Well, I mean, I would suggest, early on, just do a spreadsheet exercise and say, okay, so if we output at a frequency of this is what happens to quality over, X number of iterations of this, right? And what's the dollar impact of that quality degradation, right? So if I don't know what you're doing, but I don't know if you can say what you're doing, like the recommendation engine, or like what is it?
Recommendation engine or even demand forecasting. So just something as basic as that.
So you have your null, you have your null hypothesis. We don't do anything, and this is kind of what we're doing right now. There's no model, right? That's your baseline. So inaccuracy. Okay, so when does inaccuracy, when does low quality actually start doing more harm than good? Right? You start losing money. So do you feel like time, more like moving faster will actually degrade quality over time?
Actually, I think it's a possibility or a probability. So there's risk if we don't do things properly. Yeah. Let me give you one example. So when I'm setting up logging, monitoring, alerting, then one businessman just asked me, what if we don't do that? We just have a guy manually look up the pipeline. This
guy's crazy, by the way. I'm going to tell you right now. That's like saying, let's go drive really fast down the freeway, but I want you to duct tape your speedometer, and and in fact, we're going to duct tape your gear as well, so it's only going to be in the highest gear. Like, this person's a lunatic. But carry on.
But that's pretty much it. So the thing is that the business people, they don't understand what we are doing. I try to convince them with my experience, but previously I've been there in I would call it a failure project. So the errors happening in production almost every day. So we might just fix up things manually almost every day. We are like firefighters, if you know what I mean. So I try to convince them, but sometimes it's hard. So but then back to our question. So how do we kind of balance something? Or should we compromise or not?
So I'm trying to figure out where the club is here.
Okay. I'm afraid that this is both a challenge and a challenge that you have to answer in 2 minutes. So over to Mickey.
Okay. Okay. So just to restate the question. So right now your ML delivery process is at X amount of time or whatever. And you potentially want to get it to Y amount of time, or even you want just to make it easier on yourselves. It seems like you do understand that the business does need to make money. But at the same time, the business is kind of putting you in a position that might in fact compromise the business's integrity. It might risk their reputation. It might cost them lost revenue. So that's one way to frame it to them. Right. But the other part too is the way I look at it is sometimes the biggest jerks in the room, that are sitting across from you, if you can kind of churn them like a spy, they might actually become your biggest advocates. Because for them, it's not even you saying, we're not going to do this for you. It's well, first off, I cannot compromise on these things because I'm looking out for the company's dollar line. And do you know what happens when we don't have those guardrails up? Look up all Google search news links of all the companies that have totally screwed up. And more likely you're working at a company that doesn't have the dinero that Google or Facebook does to pay off, the GPR fine, right? So that's one way to frame it. And especially if you can frame it in an ask from the business side, okay, we can make this easier, with all the safety checks built in, but we need XYZ to do whatever, get a tool to patch, create a patchwork for the process or whatever. So that's one way to kind of use in a very uncomfortable situation and conversation to kind of help pull your team forward to actually kind of getting the steps on there? Because I imagine your team also does not like doing that manual logging and experiment tracking and setup and all that other stuff. I know I didn't when I was on the ML platform team.
Yeah. I think that this is such a great conversation.
Can I just give one shout out? We actually did an interview with an ML engineering manager at a e-commerce company that just launched in my podcast, Monday Morning Data Chat, just a few days ago. Listen to that. We talk exactly about this problem.
Okay, and with that subtle, not so subtle plug, can we just do a quick round of applause and show our appreciation for Mickey and Joe? And for those who are playing conference bingo, we've now can break and let you go and have afternoon tea. Thanks very much. We'll see you outside.